everyone. Welcome to the Tech Seeking Human podcast. My name is Dave Anderson, and the person I'm speaking to has a phenomenal background, and I'm not joking. So, Sean, where do I start? Let me see if I can have a go at this, and you tell me whether I've got any of this right or not.
Okay.
Where do I start? You worked at the White House in cybersecurity. So
True.
there's a podcast in itself. So hopefully we don't go too long on that topic. Which president were you working under at the time?
The last president, President Trump.
Okay. Well, this could go for a while. And then you were you drove the ships, like Coast Guard.
Driver, yep.
Okay, so you know a lot
right.
about distribution of goods through shipping ports.
Supply chain.
What's it called? Supply chain.
Supply chain.
Yep. Okay, so you know that it's actually physically shipping containers. I used to talk about virtual containers at one point in my life, but these are real containers, so that's pretty cool. You also were in Afghanistan serving for the US military?
Yep. Doing offensive cybersecurity, so attacking other countries, or in this case, the Taliban, and Al Qaeda and other terrorist organizations. But yep.
You married an Olympic swimmer?
I did, and I'm still married to an Olympic swimmer. In fact, we hit 10 years in 2 weeks. But
congratulations!
Yes, I'm married. Maddie Crippen, well-known U.S. Olympic swimmer for the United States.
I saw her swim in the Sydney Olympics. It turns out, which is hilarious.
She was in the Sydney Olympics. That's good.
But you've got quite the background. Like honestly, you sit at a dinner party. And you go, wow, like if you got stuck next to someone at a dinner party and you go like, so tell me a little bit about yourself. And you go, well, I was in the Coast Guard. Well, I went to Afghanistan. Well, I went to cybersecurity for the US, for the White House. And well, I married an Olympic swimmer. The person next to you would go, I don't know if I've got anything to talk to you about, really. The question is really, where do we start? And
well, then you got to follow it up with, and now you work for an AI company.
And now you work for an AI company. Is that just as interesting as the other?
Well, that's why I'm here. Trying to keep the ball rolling, right?
That's a massive claim for DataRobot and AI to have someone with such a diverse background and so many unique and interesting things. And we want to come back to like how and why and what are you doing with DataRobot. But first, I've got to ask about working at the White House in cybersecurity, because the headline news in Australia is Australian government looks to artificial intelligence as part of its cybersecurity policy. And of course, the article has no substance in it at all. Can you give us the insight into what were you doing when you were working for the US government in cybersecurity? What are they doing? Like, what's their policy around it, and where are the threats coming from? And what is AI doing?
Sure, absolutely. I'll cover that a couple different ways, right? So, when I was there 2018, 2019. My job was on the National Security Council. I owned how does the U.S. do military operations in cyberspace? So how do we do offensive activity? I also owned maritime cybersecurity, right? So how do we protect the supply chain, ironically, from cybersecurity attacks, from cyber attacks, and then I also owned how do we handle the China relationship, right? How do we push back against the adversarial cyber attacks that China conducts to steal our intellectual property and cause economic outcomes in the United States that favor China. So I own those. Those were my primary issues. It was an amazing experience, right? Working at the highest level of government, and thankfully, thankfully, I was able to actually get a lot of that passed and signed by the president. So it's enacted. Those are presidential executive orders and different activities for the United States, and they've survived to this day, right? So the administration has changed, but I kind of feel like saying, I must have done something right, because they're still in play today, right? They're still being used in the current administration.
So can I unpack that? So do you mean you developed strategies or tactics or policies What sort of policies? What are these policies?
So I
Simple
led the
terms.
initiative. Sure. To give you the simple terms. During the Trump administration, we recognized that the United States was not doing enough to combat our adversaries, right? China, Russia, Iran, North Korea were taking it to us in cyberspace with no repercussions, right? You can't just get up there and say, "Stop cyber attacking us." I mean, I get it. You may be the president of the free world, of the United States of America, but that it's not a deterrent, right? It doesn't stop activity. We've seen it, over the past 15 years. No matter what the president is, it doesn't change our adversaries' activity. And I always say, why not? People say, why not? And I said, because it's successful. It works, right? Like these cyber attacks are successful. That's why we keep seeing them in the news.
What are they?
So
What are the cyber attacks? Like, what were they doing to the US?
sure. So like right now, the number one topic is ransomware,
Uh,
right? So you have multiple nations, but in particular Russia. Russia's has criminal actors that are conducting cyber attacks to ransom the computer systems of American businesses. And now these Russian actors, these criminal organizations in Russia, are acting with impunity,
mhm.
basically because they have what you would call a letter of marque. Now, to go back to the privateering days, the pirate days of the 18, 17, 16, 17, 1800s, you have a government that is basically saying, hey, as long as you don't attack us, we're okay with it. So they're having these letters of marque where they can go attack another country without feeling that they'll be prosecuted or held accountable for it. And so that's the number one issue right now, at least in the United States, is we're seeing ransomware attacks against U.S. businesses, basically taking businesses offline and shutting them down, essentially, holding them hostage for money.
Like Garmin, right? Where they
Yeah,
took
that's
Garmin
right.
down.
Garmin is a good example.
I woke up and
Maersk,
I couldn't
yeah.
discover my sleep anymore. And so I obviously thought, maybe my watch is down for a bit, but turns out, it was something a little bigger than my little sleep patterns that they were after. But what did you do? So was it a defensive,
No, so it
these
was
guys are
offensive.
attacking?
Yeah,
What
absolutely.
offensive mean? So like you're going, all right, you attack me, that's it. I'm going to go and attack you now.
So we
What does it mean?
rewrote the rule. So the rule book before had a significant number of constraints on how you could conduct that response or offensive activity to deter or stop an adversary. We rewrote those activities. We rewrote what the authorities said you could offensively do. We basically empowered the Department of Defense in the United States to go take action against these criminal actors, terrorist organizations, nation states, other countries that were attacking us. We basically took we took the chains off and said, hey, DOD, go get them. You can go
Oh,
stop
wow.
this activity.
So a
So
cyber attack in some regards could be seen almost as much as it's a physical attack. Is that so? It's like this gang, like say Garmin, right? They got taken down for 5 days. They said, pay us $5 million, and then we'll uncrypt all of your computers and you can regain services. And of course, Garmin does more than just the watches. They do all the navigation, the ships and planes and stuff. So that was a calculated attack. Now, does the US government then go to the Department of Defense and go, we sort of know who it is. You're allowed to do something about this now. What is the action that they take? Is it a physical thing, or they attack them online, or they threaten them, or
so that's a great question.
It doesn't have to be that specific use case. It can be any though. That a gang that causes this problem. What can they do?
So that's a great question, right? So now, obviously, we know, right, the commander in chief, the president of the United States, controls the activity. But what we did is we wrote authorities that said you could conduct activity short of war, right? You could go conduct cyber activities in response to that. So let's say you were in a criminal gang, you attacked me, I owned a company in the United States, you ransomwared me. If, at the discretion of the military commanders, the Secretary of Defense, right, and leadership in the United States, they could respond by attacking you to the extent of, hey, I'm going to hack into your bank account and take all your money. I'm going to give you 1,000 parking tickets and make it so your life's difficult. I'm going to shut the power off at your house, or a series of events, just an effort to respond, to make your life more difficult, to prevent you from conducting further activity. That's essentially what we rewrote the rules on.
I like this game. So I like how you made me the evil one. So I'm going to continue with that. So I am Dr. Evil, and I'm
probably not the first to do
that. Probably not. So I'm Dr. Evil, and I'm willing, and I have conducted a attack on your business in this regards. And let's pretend I live in Australia, sure, which is where I live. Now, does the US government have to coordinate with the Australian government in attacking me? Because this is one where it's probably not coming from Australia, it's probably coming from Russia and China, and therefore the US probably doesn't have relationships with Russia and China in the same way that it does with Australia. So if I'm going to take money from your bank account and cause havoc to your life, would I notify their government, hey, I'm going to do this to these people, or am I just going to go, we're just doing it?
So now if it's Australia, we wouldn't do that. If it's Australia, you're a member of the Five Eyes community. The US government would turn around and say, hey, Australia, I need your FBI equivalent to go take care of that guy.
Yeah.
But countries such as Russia or China, yes, previously the rules were written, or the way that the US conducted policy is they would tell the government, hey, we're unhappy that Dave did these things. We're going to do something to Dave. Well, obviously, it's like, hey, Dave's going to get hit. All right, we'll take care of Dave. Don't worry about it. Dave, this one, just relax for a minute. It's going to hurt just for a second. That's not a deterrent activity, right? When the other country is supporting it. Mm-hmm. So we've abandoned that philosophy. The government abandoned that philosophy, and the government now can take actions unilaterally without informing the nation.
Wow. It's a lot of power. It's a lot of power that can be wielded by people who can wrongly make decisions that, you'd hope you're accurate.
Well, a couple different things. First off, aren't those decisions already being made against citizens in Australia and businesses in Australia and businesses in the United States, right? So those decisions are already being made against us. So when we say that, is that a lot of power? Is it really? We're already the victims. So why would we not defend ourselves?
Is there a United Nations for online, like a United Nations for cyber, like an international police? Do you know what I mean, though? Because it's a small world, right?
An international rules-based order.
Yeah, it should be like some kind of special forces that exist with a United Nations dedicated just for cybersecurity and cyber. It just, I don't know. That seems to make sense to me, or is that completely crazy?
So
it's crazy the way you just paused.
I think history would show you that adversarial nations disagree with a rules-based order. When we look at Russian seizure of Crimea, that just violated the rules-based order. When we look at China building islands in the middle of the ocean and claiming the land as their own, and then extending their international extending their waters out into the middle of international waters, there are certain nations that do not have respect for a rules-based order. They never have. You look at 300 fishing vessels off the coast of Ecuador, fishing all of Ecuador's fish out and hauling it back to China, right? Certain countries have no respect for international rules-based order. So it's hard. You can't say that one group of countries or one country is going to do those things and expect that another nation will, because they don't.
So the answer really is the existing relationships, the existing ethics, or the groups, or the Five Eyes, or whatever you called it. Cybersecurity just becomes part of the conversations. That's another. Right. It's just another part of where we have discussions over physical boundaries and strategies and things like that.
Absolutely.
That's so. What role does AI play in all of this?
Right. So, great question. You're seeing right now, we're seeing nations make significant strides in investments in AI. We've heard the U.S. say that, AI is the future. In fact, we have the National Security Commission on Artificial Intelligence that issued a report last year. You've seen Vladimir Putin, Russia, in 2018 or 17 or 18, I believe it was 18, said AI is the future. Whoever leads in AI will rule the world. You've seen the Prime Minister of China, Xi Jinping, say that AI is their number one priority investment, and they're going to be the world leader by 2030. Right? So why are these nations saying AI matters so much? And I think, in my point of view, and this is part of the reason why, I came to DataRobot, right? I came to the robot because I do believe that it matters. AI would, first off, at the lowest level, augments the intelligence cycle, right? What I mean by that is there is a decision cycle that every human makes in a situation where we observe a situation that occurs, we orient ourselves to decide understand what's going on, we decide what we're going to do in that situation, and then we act on it. It's often called the OODA loop. And all references go to John Boyd there, a famous warfighter in America, Air Force officer. But that's what we do in every situation. Now, AI allows us to harness different observables and provide us a probability of what that decision should be faster than we could do on our own. Mm-hmm. Right. So that's the lowest level of AI, is augmenting the intelligence. The highest level of AI is when we're allowing the system to make that decision cycle on its own and then operate on its own. And I think that's the glide slope, the transition path of where we're moving to. Right now, all these investments are, how do we empower humans to make better decisions, and then the secondary piece of how do we automate defensive capability. Hey, I saw this was something going on. How do I decide and augment my defensive posture faster than the adversary could respond? And all the way through to where we want to be, 2030, where the AI system is presenting us all the way through to that decision point of actual activity. And we think about that often in the Terminator standpoint, right? Everyone loves to jump right to, T-1000, Terminator, gets sent on a mission, just makes decisions. But people rarely think about, how does that matter in an economic capacity, right? Imagine you can use AI in the marketplace, where it's observing the market and making decisions faster than the market can react for your own profitability. Imagine where it's making these decisions to drive efficiencies in manufacturing, probabilities of where to gather natural resources, market variables on where to invest in real estate, those types of plays, even predicting the weather, right? So when we think about where AI could go on the battlefield as well as in the economic zone, if we're ahead and making better positive decisions, I think every leading nation in the world agrees that whoever is leading that will be the world leader.
So I immediately thought when you said 3 countries, Terminator scenario, that's what immediately what I jumped to, right? I imagine an AI of China, Russia, and America combating each other in some form of cyber warfare, or
Sure.
their AI manipulating economic systems to create beneficial playing fields for them, for oil, for manufacturing, or whatever. But you're also just talking the simplicity of countries being more efficient in their own industries in what they do, whether that is anything from their own manufacturing to banking to real estate to all these things. It's the countries that can leverage this AI for the better of its own people will make them more efficient and will prosper.
That's right. That's right. We to play off of your America's team there, Boston Red Sox cap. Everyone assumes the game is played in grand slams when, home runs where everybody, you have home runs plus everybody on base, when the game's actually played in singles, and those incremental economic boosts lead to a GDP, a gross domestic product, and the economic output that provides you an unmatched advantage on the diplomatic playing field, where you can literally force countries to support your economic agenda, right? And we're seeing that we see that right now in terms of China using a heavy hand in the South Pacific Islands, and then also in South America and in Africa, where they're using it to extrapolate natural resources and paying the country off. It's a short-term gain for the country and a long-term benefit for the economy of China.
So you said the US didn't really have any policy around cybersecurity until you sort of came in and started working on it. I read a little bit. Yeah, okay. No, well then let me take the different approach. So for anyone who's just listening to this, Sean just pointed at me because I was pointing at him actually. But he pointed at me going, no, you're actually sort of wrong. But if you listen to the audio side, but actually I wanted to come back to one question, which is it got to do with the investment. I read in Genius Makers, which is a really good book by a guy called Cade Metz, who talks about the evolution of AI throughout time and what's happening in modern history. And if I summarize what I learned and the biggest fear that I had, the US government wanted to work with Microsoft and Google, who have arguably the best AI engineers available because of the money that's where the money is, right? So that's where the AI engineers are going, aside from obviously geniuses that work at DataRobot. But people like Baidu, on the other hand, in China, and then to finish my sentence on the AI in the US, they want to work, like the Department of Defense wants to work with Google and Microsoft. And for anyone who hasn't been following the news, a huge backlash where most of the employees went, absolutely no way is that going to happen. Then you go over to China and there is no backlash because the government will have access to Baidu's top engineers, or any engineers for that matter, where they will develop AI without any ethical boundaries. Is this a divide in terms of both the talent and the investment of the two countries? In your opinion?
Yes. So 3 different answers. I'll segment that apart. The first answer to, when I raised my point on the China policy, on the US cyber policy. Yeah. The US did have an evolving cyber policy all the way back from the Bush years through Obama and into the Trump years. It was just an evolution of process, right? If you go back to the Bush and Obama years, the overwhelming thought was cyber attacks were a silver bullet and they could cause it was a nuclear deterrence theory, right? Like, you would use your cyber attack in a way that you would use your nuclear weapons. And we've obviously proven, unfortunately, it's been proven to us by Russian criminal actors, Russian state actors, and Chinese state actors that it's not a nuclear weapon and it's being used against us every day.
Yep.
We've just continued to evolve the policy, and thankfully, luckily, thankfully, I was in a position, I got to be in a position at a time where we were able to evolve that policy to another level to what it is today. So that's where I was going there. The secondary aspect, or the secondary question that you had, where about this AI, evolution and how we're facing off against, let's say, a China in this aspect, and how does big tech handle that or come into play?
Yeah.
There's two different things. So the big tech, or the Silicon Valley of China, doesn't exist in a open playing field, right? The workers in China don't have a choice whether they would work or not. That's not how it works. I mean, look at, I dare you to go find Jack Ma, right? The Alibaba CEO. Where is he? He was turning into, he was like the third richest person in the world.
And he's
Where
gone.
is he now? Gone, right?
Is he still gone?
There's the multiple articles out there that say that he's faced the backlash of Xi Jinping, right? In 2017, China came out with a cybersecurity law that basically said, you must provide, if you want to operate in China, you will provide us access to your data. You will provide us, the Chinese government, access to this information, right? So the United States, obviously, everyone gets a vote. And so when DOD, the Department of Defense in the US, said, hey, we wanted to work AI issues, you saw that backlash from Google. You saw that backlash from, different employees. The irony is, what did we see last week? LinkedIn finally said they were closing their doors in China, right? Google was operating in China. Microsoft was operating in China. So you had years of where employees were saying, oh, we don't want to support AI in the Department of Defense. And yet they're still supporting that, like Google was supporting AI in China. So like, to me, that's a little bit of, we allow so much freedom in the United States that we also allow the freedom of people not to read, not to understand that their same company that they're saying they can't support DOD is actually supporting the government of the oppressive government of China.
We should move on, because I want to get to the DataRobot and cybersecurity, but I can't help, as you're talking about this, I'm like, freedom of choice, freedom of whatever. Yeah. I still come back to the idea of like, if it's a questionable ethical government, they're not very ethical, and they do want to develop an AI to cause harm, then you need to defend yourself. And at times of war in the past, people didn't have choices, that their choices were taken away from them, and they were forced to do things they didn't want to do because it was for the good of the country. I don't think we should ever speculate on this right now, but I do hope we never get into that scenario where it's like we need to develop AI to develop ourselves physically from physical AI attacking us, like Terminator.
I think I think we're a little ways off there. But what I do think is interesting is when we talk about the marketplace right now, and we talk about ethical AI or trusted AI is a well-spoken term. You speak about adversarial AI, right, which is an AI system attacking another AI system, or trying to drive an outcome. Where I do think there's market differentiation in the United States, or let's just say the Western Hemisphere, is there are a significant number of products coming to market where companies believe that the AI that they're providing, the algorithms that they're using, are proprietary, and they don't want to share that information. That's the black box that makes their AI special.
Yep.
And then there's other companies, of which thankfully, and I believe in, is DataRobot's one of them,
Yep.
where we provide a trusted AI platform where we actually think the algorithm is not the proprietary information. It's the implementation of the platform, the rollout of the capability, and then the follow-on innovation of the players, the employees involved. That's what provides the market differentiation. And we call that trusted AI. And that's where we actually, we're happy to show, hey, how was this decision calculated? How did you find this this path to success? And to move that to the combating the Terminator or the adversarial AI activity, where an AI system would be pushing in to derive a certain negative outcome for you. And what I mean by that, if you think back, to me, I don't know why, maybe my simple mind, but I go back to the what was that game in Price is Right, where it was like Pongo or Pingo, wherever you drop the thing in and it goes choo 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 all the way to the bottom. You think about that from an AI aspect, and it's a series of logical statements. Adversarial AI could be derived to say, give a certain inputs to get to an outcome that is non-beneficial or adversarial per se to the host. It's much harder to do when you have a trusted system where you can see all of the calculations and you can see how you can get to that decision point. And that's why I actually believe more in that trusted AI aspect as opposed to the black box
Absolutely. So, and I'll unpack that a little for anyone else, because we've done a lot of podcast episodes talking just about this particular topic. So as AI is being used to make more decisions, people naturally will question those decisions, and you want it to be as fair as possible. So you're not segregating, you're not being sexist, you're not being ageist, you're not being, you're equally treating socio-demographics, you're not using group data, but all these things. So you're giving a fair outcome to an insurance policy that's been delivered, or the amount of healthcare that I'm getting supplied with, or the drugs that I'm supposed to take. And I mean legalized, proper drugs for the benefit of society and yourself. The other thing to that is it's also important for the developers, because the developers who are developing the AI also need to be able to explain it, because it's never one developer working on an AI or an algorithm. It's multiple, right? And as people contribute to it, they all need to have a common understanding of what its pitfalls are and when it skews off into somewhere where it's going wrong and creating a bias, therefore it can be corrected. And that's both of those examples I think are really important from a consumer perspective and also from the user perspective. Now, without doing so, and that's what the DataRobot does. Right? So that's one of the things a DataRobot can do, is be able to explain its decision making and eliminate sort of elements of bias, or put its hand up and say, I'm not tracking as well as we were previously. What's the role? You've come on as a cybersecurity person from the White House, who used to drive ships, who married a swimmer. But he's a cybersecurity expert. Now, when I first joined DataRobot, which is all of not long ago, they didn't do cybersecurity. Like, cybersecurity is a niche. These are the tools, and this is what we use, and point solution. So DataRobot's a broader platform. What's its role? Why is this a new area?
Why does it make sense?
Yeah.
That's a great
why
question.
does it make sense?
So great question. I think I go back to, when I was leaving government and I was looking at where I should go in the private sector, I did talk to a significant number of cybersecurity companies, right? That's my bailiwick. That's what I like to do, and that's what I want to continue doing. But my thought process is there's a tremendous focus on the current method of the way things occur in cybersecurity, right? You build your SOC out, then you build your threat hunt team, and then you build your intelligence team, or vice versa. And then you build a vulnerability team, and it's pretty, there are a lot of standardized roles there, right? And there are some very good products that do individualized things. And I said to myself, I said, what's next? Like, where are we going after that? Where are companies migrating their technology stack to that maybe these existing cybersecurity postures will have to adapt to next? And that's what drove me to the AI space. And I started talking with DataRobot, and DataRobot was a platform, right? This is one of the things I love is I came in, I said, well, where's DataRobot operating? And they're like, oh, well, we're in insurance. We're doing some things in manufacturing. We're in finance, high-speed trading. We've got some random things in audit and accounting. And to me, I said, well, what are we doing in cyber? And they said, well, nothing really. We haven't really done much there yet. And I said, the data is still data, right? If you have a platform that can harness the power of better decision making, why can't we put cybersecurity information into that platform and still come out with better decisions? If you're doing it in manufacturing and you're doing it in insurance and finance, those things aren't alike, right? So what's the difference if we take a different data set from cybersecurity and bring that in? I bet you we could also come up with better decision-making process. And so that's what spurred me on or excited me to come to DataRobot, is that was that green playing field. And I talked to some of the companies that are cyber companies trying to do AI versus an AI company, DataRobot, doing cybersecurity. Cyber companies trying to do AI have come up with very pointed solution, right? They have a solution that detects one instance. It detects, hey, we detect this one anomaly. We have an algorithm that detects one use case in cybersecurity. And as you just mentioned about drift and data accuracy, over time, that solution, that single pointed AI solution could drift and not be successful, and you never know it.
Yep.
And I said, well, how do I get to an AI company that can solve multiple problems in cybersecurity? Oh, and by the way, when those solutions start to drift, as in the adversary changes tactics, it can still track that and understand that, hey, it needs to retrain. This model is no longer valid. I need to do different things to still provide a valuable defense. Yep. And DataRobot provides that, in my opinion, and that's what we're building here in the cybersecurity space.
What have you come across in terms of customers or use cases or stories that maybe surprised you, that you were like, because there's intelligent people working within all sorts of organizations that are now going like, wait a second, your AI can do what? I could apply that myself in this particular use case. And that's when you get these ahas of like, oh yeah, wow, we can. Have you got examples of customers you've been working
Sure.
with or people you've spoken to that you were sort of surprised at how they were using it, and give us an example?
Sure. So I'm going to give you two different examples. One was the common ones that there's a few that I expected and they're proving true. Mm-hmm. And then there was a few that I was like, hey, I didn't think about that, but yeah, cool. That's a great idea. Yeah. So the ones that I thought that proved true, if you think about security operations centers, SOCs, mm-hmm. SOCs 1.0, 2000, mid 2000s, all the way up to, let's say, 2014, was, hey, we have no idea what's going on. We need to put firewalls up, segment our network, and look at the traffic in and out. Got to keep the bad guys out.
Yep.
SOC 2.0 was, 2014 through to today, said, oh, I have all these sensors out here. I need to understand what's going on. And I bring them all in. And that's where you have all this, Star Wars screens and all the data coming in and, pew, pew.
Is it 2014, 2015 because of cloud, out of interest? Because you can't just protect a network anymore. Your networks are virtual, devices are everywhere. Understand.
That's right. You went to, people started realizing how big their terrain actually was, right? Like how big their networks actually were.
Yeah.
And frankly, more tools came to market that said, I can give you visibility of this. I can give you visibility of that.
Yep.
So we got that visibility. Now it's just a fire hose. now it's like so much information coming in. I'm alerting on everything at the same time.
Yep.
So SOC 3.0 is how do we validate, these 5 alerts are actually a single event. This one matters, this one doesn't. This needs to go routed to the network people. This needs to be routed to the endpoint people. This goes to the CERT team, right? So the first AI estimation that is proved true is, how do we predict when we see those trouble tickets? How do we predict that these 5 trouble tickets are actually the same sequence of events? These 7 trouble tickets need to be routed to this place. These need to go here. Shorten that decision cycle and reduce the cost in the SOC, right?
Yeah.
We can't hire enough cybersecurity people. Maybe we can be more efficient with the ones we have.
Yep.
That proved true. One of the ones that surprised me was to speak to cloud, as you brought up earlier, is we started talking to people. Cloud infrastructure is enormously growing, and it shouldn't have surprised me, I guess, now that I think back. I mean, if you look at AWS, Amazon's profits in their cloud infrastructure,
going to reInvent for the last 6 years every year became a dogfight to even just get a coffee. Like, the place is going gangbusters, right?
That's right. And you have Azure cloud going nuts. You have Google cloud going nuts. And what else has spawned up at the same time? I think it's at about $56,000 a coin right now.
Bitcoin.
Bingo. So a giant cryptocurrency mining industry has spawned at the same time that you have all this cloud infrastructure coming out of nowhere. People are standing up their major cloud instances. The security on the cloud instances isn't really there. You have people that are saying, hey, that's free compute power. Let me start using that compute power, while you're looking right, trying to just get a hold of your regular business. I'm going to steal all that extra compute power you're using and start mining cryptocurrency. So one of the use cases that totally blew my mind was detecting when your cloud infrastructure was being used for crypto mining. We can predict that by looking at processes that are occurring in your cloud, temperatures of the CPUs, right? Like load and temperature on the CPU, action and power that they're pulling in. It's like that power's out of that range because it's doing crypto mining. And that just, I was like, I didn't think of that use case.
Can I be honest? I'm going to be. I don't know anything about cryptocurrency. I wish I did, and Bitcoin and that. And I just I don't get it. But I get the concept of what are they mining for? I don't want to go away from the use case. Where do you go looking? How do you mean there? Is there a pot of gold somewhere and you mine? Is that literally what it does? This could be a whole separate podcast.
Yeah.
All right,
I'm going
to need a cryptocurrency person to come on and a Bitcoin person and explain to me what on earth is going on. But I get the idea of the free tier on AWS being used for purposes other than what the company initiated it for. And that to me that makes complete sense. And it could be dangerous from a security perspective, not just for cryptocurrency, I would imagine. It could also be used for malicious code, for also attacking Trojan things, all those cyber words that I know nothing about, but have read extensively in the last 5 to 10 years, and can imagine that they're very evil. But that's a pretty interesting use case for identifying, there's no application per se running, but there's processes connected to this cloud infrastructure that probably shouldn't be.
That's right.
Where are we going? What's next? What's going on with cybersecurity and AI? Is there anything that we should be on the lookout for?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you the strategic view of just where we are going here at DataRobot. In general, most of the cybersecurity industry is focused on the known knowns, right? Mm-hmm. Indicators of compromises, or IOCs, as you've probably heard. That's basically saying, hey, I saw this happen in the wild. I'm now seeing it on your computer. Bad is bad, right?
IOC, International Olympic Committee. That's what went through my head when you said IOC.
I will still say bad is bad on that one too.
Okay.
We can talk about global sports corruption in a whole nother
another podcast.
Yeah.
Is that a topic that you go into? I guess you could, couldn't you? Okay. Let's stay on track. There's a separate podcast. This is why I wanted to get Sean on the podcast, by the way, for people listening, is because his background is fascinating. And so you just tease a little thing like corruption in international sport. Don't tell me you got to get on that. Oh, yeah, here we go. And then I find out all sorts of stuff that I didn't know. Known is known. Yeah. No, bad is bad. That's where you were.
That's right.
That's right. My fault. Right. I antagonize you to go off on way too many tangents. Okay.
So that's a lot of the industry is built on that, right? I see it happen in the wild, and then I tell people, hey, if you see this in your system, that's bad. The problem is our adversaries, like the China and the Russias of the world, they're good, right? China graduates more computer scientists every year than all of college graduates in the United States.
Holy crap. See,
yeah. So
I can't help it, though. It's going to be dangerous for us. Anyway.
That's one. Yeah, exactly. So when you have that scenario, right, you're going to be well beyond the capacity to understand what your adversary is doing, right? You can't track that many adversaries. You're just overwhelmed.
Yep.
So how do we find out those known unknowns, which is we know it's in APT, a nation state level activity, but we don't know what they're doing? And how do we track the unknown unknowns, which is we don't know what nation state, we don't know what's going on, and we can't identify their adversarial activity against us. Can we predict bad without ever having seen it before? And that's what we are really working on in DataRobot, is how are we positioning ourselves to solve problems of identifying those adversaries that have never been seen before.
Got it. Yep. So beyond human capability at a scale so that we can know the unknowns, because we know we don't.
That's right. And do it. And that's right. And do it at scale. At scale.
Because that's going to be key. Sean, it's been a remarkable conversation. And I look forward to sitting and having an actual beer with you somewhere. I get the feeling that if we sat down for a beer, the conversation would go into weird and wonderful places. So maybe we can talk about sports corruption. You told me to get a book too. I haven't finished reading the book.
I feel like we'd solve a lot of problems, right? We could solve world hunger.
Yeah, tell me about there was a book you told me to get. You're Not Welcome Here. Kate, did you?
Oh, Fiona Hill.
Fiona Hill.
Yes.
I got to read this.
Nothing for you here.
There is nothing for you here. See, that's not bad that I got the last name right and I got half of the sentence of the book. That'd be enough these days in a Google search to find it. So that's worth a read. This is what's this book about?
Yeah, so I'm halfway through it. Fiona Hill is a world-renowned expert on Russia policy, but specifically U.S.-Russia policy. And she's an exquisite expert on Vladimir Putin himself. So I've read some of her other books, really insightful in understanding why Russia does things that they do, and why Putin does things that he does. And to me, when you take those real world activities and then you say, hey, if this happens in the real world, or this is the motivation in the real world, we can translate that into cyberspace, and it enlightens motivations, it enlightens adversarial activity, targets, and how to better protect ourselves in cyberspace. So that's my current read.
Fantastic. I remember you mentioning that book, and immediately I went, I'm really keen, and I've bought it. I had to buy it on Kindle because of the international shipping situation in Australia. It means that it wouldn't arrive until 2031. just like the vaccine for COVID that also took a year longer than everyone else. We're just coming out of lockdown. So everything, even though we actually live in the future here in Australia, because we're half a day or a day ahead of you, we actually live in the past by about 6 months or a year. So I look forward to catching up with you physically at some point and chatting about it. Good luck with the cybersecurity element. I'm sure you'll be fantastic. And I assume anyone that's listening that wants to apply AI initiatives for cybersecurity can contact you or
Absolutely.
directly to find out more. Or you can contact me if you really want. Sean, great to catch up with you. And thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Look forward to the next one.